Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's. I'm going to go through a few chapters of a book by the Ramban called "The Ways of Reason." In Hebrew, Derech Tevunot. Every statement that can be so. Chapter 3 is titled "Minei Hama'amarim," types of statements. Every statement that can be said, every conceivable idea, and every possible mental picture are necessarily constructed from two parts: a certain matter, which is affirmed or denied, and a thing upon which this is affirmed or denied. For example, in the Gemara Brachos 20b, of Adaba Hava said, women are obligated to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush. Here, a certain idea, the obligation to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush is affirmed about a certain thing, that is the class of women. We call the idea that is affirmed or denied the predicate, and the thing upon which it is affirmed or denied we call the subject. Accordingly, the subject of the statement is women, and the predicate is the obligation of Kiddush. With respect to either subject or predicate, statements may be classified in different ways. Statements are divided into three types according to their subjects: categorical, specific, and limited. Categorical statements have as their subjects an entire class consisting of many principles. The predicate of the statement must apply to all of them. For example, in Sanhedrin 90a, all Jews have a portion in the world to come. This statement includes many particulars in a single class, every Jewish person, and the predicate is applied to all of them. They all have a portion in the world to come. Specific statements have as their subjects one single entity. For example, in Nagaim 12:4, Jerusalem does not become ritually impure through plagues. Limited statements, there are those whose subjects contain only some part of a class. For example, in Yevamos 84a, some women are permitted to their husbands, and even so they are forbidden to perform the Levite marriage. The intention here is to speak about a part of the entire class of women. When we say about them that they are permitted to their husbands, and thus they should be eligible for Levite marriage, but they are in fact forbidden to perform the Levite marriage. One of these is a woman whose husband is a Kohen, and her husband's brother is a Kohen Gadol. Such a woman is not excluded from Levite marriage because of any prohibition to her husband, but in any event, a Kohen Gadol cannot marry a widow. Sometimes there are unqualified statements that have the same force as a categorical statement, even though the subjects are not qualified by the word all. For example, the statement mentioned earlier in Brachos 20b, women are obligated to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush, is understood to mean that all women are obligated to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush. When we consider the predicate as well as the subject, statements are divided into 11 types. These distinct formulations arise because not all predicates are applied to their subjects in the same way, and since there are different types of predication, there are accordingly these 11 different types of statements. So let's read the footnote. The Ramchal writes at the end of this chapter, in page 53, do not fix your attention on the manner of speech, but on the intended statement contained in the words. And further, in chapter 10, page 189, you must mentally extract the essence of what the speaker intends, what he wants to say, and on what subject matter he is speaking. Only then can you picture in your thoughts the straightforward formulation of that statement. These 11 formulations of statements are also mentioned in the Book of Words, chapter 2, page 565. Each statement must be arranged with proper wording, so that every one of each of its parts is clear, namely the subject, the predicate, the connection, and the respective qualifications. In this way, the listener will not err in understanding the statement as it was intended or remain in doubt about it. The straightforward formulation is not merely clarification of different possible wordings. It is essentially how we, the listeners, understand the speaker's intention in his communication to us by focusing on the basic elements defined here: the subject, the predicate, and the connection between them. Accordingly, the Ramchal's assertion here is that all the possible formulation of a speaker's statement must be one of these 11 types. Simple statement. These are statements whose predicates are applied to their subjects without any condition or limitation, as in the previously mentioned examples and other similar statements. 2. Qualified statement. In this category of statement, the application of the predicate to the subject is uniquely qualified in a definitive or tentative manner. In one instance, the predicate may be stated as a certainty or a necessity. For example, in Pesachim 9b, since weasels and martens are commonly found, they certainly dragged away the fetus before the time when the Kohen arrived. In this way, we know he did not become defiled from a dead body. or in the absence of certainty. The predicate may be stated as a possibility. For example, in Kesubas 75a, it's possible for the Kohen to remove the filth with wine vinegar, so as not to be disqualified from temple service. Alternatively, the predicate may be inconclusive. For example, in Pesach 113a, in all sales involving credit, it is doubtful whether the money will be forthcoming or not. Or it may be stated as an impossibility. For example, in Kesubas 75a, the Kohen may alleviate foul breath by putting a peppercorn in his mouth, and thus removing a blemish that might disqualify him from temple service. However, this option is impossible for a woman because she is in constant contact with her husband. This category of statements includes the entire range of variations from certainty to doubt and from possibility to impossibility. 3. Statements of exclusion. In this type of statement, the predicate is applied to a certain subject and excluded from everything else. For example, in Shemos 12:16, no manner of work shall be done on the festivals, save that which every person must eat, that alone may be done by you. This verse predicates the permissibility of work to cases involving what a person needs in order to eat, and excludes this predicate from any other case. Number 4, statement of exception. Here the predicate is removed from some elements of the general class that constitute the subject. For example, in Chelim 2a, all may slaughter except a deaf or an insane person or a minor. Here the deaf, the insane, and the minor are implicitly included in the class of Jews by the word all. However, the general rule that all are permitted to slaughter does not apply to them, as indicated by the word except. When studying these 11 types of statements, several of the distinctions are first elusive. Statements of exclusion and statements of exception appear the same, if not for the side of the excluded portion. Conditional, hypothetical, and consequent statements are all conditions of one sort or another. Preclusive statements, statements of discrepancy, are also difficult to distinguish. In all the above cases, it's useful to refer ahead to chapter 6 in order to understand the precise differences between the 11 formulations of statements. 5. Conditional statements. This is a kind of statement. The predicate is not applied to the subject absolutely. It is only true in certain respect or in according to some relevant condition. For example, in Yevamos 38a, when one performs Levite marriage, the woman is his wife in every facet of law, with the stipulation that her kesubah shall be paid from the estate of her first husband. Similarly, in Demai 1:2, second tithe money of Demai may be exchanged silver for silver, copper for copper, silver for copper, and even copper for fruit, provided the owner will then redeem the fruit, returning it to silver. 6. Hypothetical statement. This statement establishes the existence of one thing. One thing is dependent on the presence of another. It is important to take note that these first five formulations of simple statement to conditional statement all have a single subject and a single predicate, together with the words or implicit understanding that determine the type of statement. They are formed from two elements. The last 6 types of statements, starting with a hypothetical statement, all have more than one predicate, and sometimes more than one subject. Thus, each unique formula represents a specific iteration of 3 or more elements. In the book of Logic, the Ramchal explains that the first 5 statements are called basic statements, and the last are called composite statements. He makes the following distinction in supplement, page 475. Basic statements affirm or deny a predicate in a subject without any proof. Composite statements add a reasonable justification that the predicate should indeed be affirmed or denied. Consequently, we will learn to look at all of these composite statements as having a primary predicate and a secondary one, which functions as a kind of rationale or justification for the first. For example, in Demai 4:4, a man may not deliver his tithe on Shabbos, but if the poor man or the Kohen regularly eats at his table, then he may inform them that he gives them their tithes to eat on Shabbos, Sukkot 53a. Hashem says, if you come into my house, then I will come into your house. In a hypothetical statement, there are 2 distinct parts: the antecedent and the consequent. The antecedent is a clause which states the condition. In the above example, if the poor man or the Kohen regularly eat at his table, the consequent is a clause that is dependent on the antecedent, then he may give them their tithe to eat on Shabbat. Number 7, a compound statement. This is a statement of having 2 or more predicates applied to one subject, or one predicate applied to 2 or more subjects. The 2 types of compound statement are a simple compound and a disjunctive statement. A simple compound combines multiple predicates which are applied to their subject in conjunction, and likewise, in a single predicate, applying to many subjects at once. For example, in Climb 8.1, Climb on the vineyard may not be planted, nor may they be maintained, and is forbidden to receive benefit from them. Similarly, in Terumas 1.7, it's forbidden to perform the separation Teruma Gedola by designating a specific measure, weight, or number. Instead, you should measure the entire harvest and then make a mental designation without actually measuring the teruma. In these two examples, the subjects have multiple predicates. The prohibition of maintaining, planting, and receiving benefit are all predicated into intermingled plants in the vineyard, and the prohibitions of measuring, weighing, and counting are all predicated on to a separation of teruma. In Demai 6.1, one who rents a field from a Jew, a non-Jew, or a Kuthian may give the landlord his portion on tithe. In this example, one predicate dividing the produce on tithe is applied to three subjects: one who rents from a Kuthian, one who rents from a Jew, and one who rents from a non-Jew. A simple compound statement has two subcategories: one where the predicates are applied to their subjects with equal significance, as in the above examples, and another in which one part of the compound statement receives the emphasis being a novel idea, and the other one is stated in passing as something previously known. For example, in Maaseh Sheni 1.2, an unblemished firstborn animal may be sold when he is alive, but if it is blemished, it may be sold alive and also after slaughtering. Here, the fact that a blemished animal may be sold when it is alive is obvious, for even an unblemished animal may be sold while alive. Only the fact that it may be sold after it is slaughtered is a novel idea. For this is not allowed in the case of an unblemished animal, and so I might think that it is not allowed in the case of any firstborn animal. In this latter subcategory, there are two variations. The first is where the self-evident part is mentioned before the novel part, and it follows the formula not only but even, as in the above example, not only alive but even slaughtered. The second is where the novel part is mentioned before the self-evident part, and it follows the formula this and needless to say. For example, in Kalayim 8.1, Kalayim of grains and vegetables may not be planted or maintained. However, they may be eaten and any other benefit is surely permitted. Here, that they may be eaten is a novel idea, and it goes without saying that any other benefit is permissible as well. The second type of compound is called a disjunctive statement. This type includes those statements whose subject is suspended between two or more predicates, such that only one of them is actually applicable to the subject. For example, in Yevamos 112b, when one of two brothers is a deaf mute married to a normal woman and he dies, the surviving brother can perform in chalitza or Levite marriage. The common element defining this category of compound statements is both simple compounds and disjunctives have multiple predicates or subjects. Preclusive statement. In this statement, one predicate is applied to the subject and another predicate is excluded. Alternatively, a predicate is affirmed in one subject and some other subject is denied. For example, in Terumas 11.5, a Kohen who sifts a calf or two of best flour from an entire seah of wheat, which is teruma, must not discard the remainder that he does not want, but he must rather put it in a safe place. Statement of discrepancy. There is one subject to which a certain predicate is applied, together with another predicate which appears to contradict the first. For example, in Masras 5.8, the plants grow from inedible seeds, even though the seeds come from the stock of teruma, may be eaten by a non-Kohen. The fact that these seeds come from the stock of teruma is an apparent contradiction to the ruling that what grows from them may be eaten by anyone. However, there is in fact no conflict in the present circumstance because the Mishnah speaks of inedible seeds. Comparative statement. In this statement, an idea is applied to one topic based on a comparison with some other topic. For example, in Demai 6.5, if a Jew rents olive trees from a Kohen for the olive oil, and he and the landlord share the teruma, just as they share the ordinary produce. However, in the case where a Jew rents land from a Kohen, the ruling is not the same. The teruma is given entirely to the property owner. The rule in this type of statement is that a known subject is always used as the basis of comparison, and another unknown subject is equated to it. In the above example, the method of apportioning ordinary produce is according to agreement, and this is the known factor. The unknown factor, how to apportion teruma, is equated to it, and the Mishnah affirms this similarity specifically in the case when one rents olive trees for the oil. Consequence statement. In this statement, one predicate is stated as a consequence of another. For example, in Masras 2.1, when an unknown man passes by in the market saying, "Take some of my figs to eat," they may be eaten and they are exempt from tithe. Therefore, upon bringing these tithes into one's house, the obligation to tithe them is a certainty. The undoubted obligation to tithe is a consequence of the fact that the figs were entirely permissible beforehand. But when an unknown man carries produce through the market with no specific intent to sell, it is assumed that he never considered performing even the Torah obligation to tithe. And nonetheless, such produce may be eaten on a temporary basis. By the same token, the figs have definite obligation to be tithed by the recipient when he enters his own house, and not merely as demai, since they previously never needed to be tithed, even from the point of view of an unknown man. In every case where we want to differentiate these 11 categories of statements, it is essential to understand that people express their thoughts in words using a variety of styles. Some use many words, while others are extremely brief. Some people speak literally, while others speak rhetorically or metaphorically. These things are well known in the disciplines of grammar and rhetoric. However, our current concern is simply this. No matter what order or manner of expression is used, when we penetrate to the core intention of a statement, we will discover that the speaker simply desires to apply a particular predicate to a particular subject. Otherwise, his words have no substance and no complete thought can be formed in the mind of the listener. Therefore, do not fix your attention on the manner of speech, but on the intended statement contained in the words. If the expression is condensed, you must supply what is missing in your mind, and if it is more lengthy, you must remove the extraneous parts until in your mind you have a straightforward formulation of the subject spoken about, the predicate said about it, and the type of statement you use as I explained above. For example, in Pesachim 7b, Rav Papi said in Rabbi's name, one should bless who has commanded us to remove leaven, implying an action that has not yet been performed, and not who has commanded us concerning the removal of leaven, which only implies an action already done. The second phrase is invalid since the blessing is cited before the fulfillment of the commandment and should be worded accordingly. An objection was raised from another text stating that on circumcision the blessing in fact was commanded concerning circumcision. At this point, the Gemara answers, in that case, how else could he say it? Should he say to circumcise? And it is impossible for anyone besides the Mohel to perform the circumcision. In this answer, the Gemara's style is very brief and makes use of rhetorical questions. But the straightforward formulation of the first statement is simply that the Mohel has no alternative but to bless concerning circumcision. This is a statement of exclusion. The second statement gives the reason. Since the obligation to circumcise does not fall primarily on him, it is not proper for him to bless to circumcise. This is a consequent statement. These two statements should be formulated in your mind from all the words of the Gemara quoted above. The Gemara continues with another difficulty in Pesachim 7b. What can you say in the case where a father circumcises his own son? Here, according to your original understanding, the father is not restricted to bless concerning circumcision like the Mohel. Thus, the straightforward statement is the father has no reason not to bless to circumcise the son. And this is what he should do. This is a qualified statement denying impossibility. That is to say, both blessing are possibility and consequently both are valid. Implying an action that has not yet been performed. The Gemara answers for Rav Papi, yes, this is indeed the case. Rav Papi must see the distinction between the Mohel and the father, since only the Mohel who cannot bless the circumcision. And thus, for Rav Papi, the above mentioned text about the blessing concerning circumcision must be referring exclusively to the Mohel. However, as for the father of the child, he must definitely bless the circumcised. It is also a qualified statement. In every text, this method of a straightforward formulation should be applied. That's the end of the chapter. Thank you for listening and all the best. Bye.